All right, there we go. Welcome. Hi,
Thank
Wendy.
you.
Hello, everybody.
Hello.
I just realized we didn't do intro music,
No.
but
Okay.
oh well. That's okay.
Okay, we could sing.
Yeah.
I'm tone
Are you
deaf,
good at
so-
karaoke? No.
No.
Okay.
No.
Well, we have, as you can see, and as the description says, and for everyone listening on the podcast, we have independent producer and consultant, both creatively and for the business, Wendy Kram.
Hello.
We've known
Nice
each other
to-
for a long time, right?
Yes.
Well, you've known about the ISA for a while. I've been with the ISA for 4 years. When did you come? I remember you were at a holiday party a few
Right.
years ago,
Yeah.
but we knew each other before then.
Through different, I think,
Just
events that you
industry
guys
stuff.
have. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, anyway, welcome.
Thank
Obviously,
you.
Felicity is not here. She's still traipsing around the English countryside and
Good for her.
a week and a half long birthday trip that she took. Last week we had Cameron Graham, who was a coach with my story farm, but today we've got Wendy Kram. So not just a guest, but co-host, we'll call it. You know,
Okay.
we're going to have a lot to talk about. We're going to talk a lot about the business side of things. Obviously, Wendy's one of the best script consultants in town, but she knows a lot about how to approach the business side of your career, and so that's what we're going to talk about. But before we get there, actually, why don't we have you
Yes.
introduce yourself first, and then we'll go into the
Okay.
sponsor, just so you're not sitting there like, okay,
All right.
as I'm reading
Hello.
through.
Okay. So my name is Wendy Kram.
Wendy.
I'm an independent producer. I got my start working for a production company called Sand Dollar that was actually the biggest management company in Hollywood at the time, and they had deals at Disney and Universal, did movies like Father of the Bride.
Oh, I
and
love Father of the Bride.
it was really my bosses who had set it up, and it was a great experience to
Yeah.
be working there. And they also did the original Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Hmm.
And from there, I went on to work at Hearse Entertainment when it was really robust with the TV movie industry.
Ah,
And then from there, I was at Sony Entertainment, did a mini series when I was there about Thomas Jefferson and his affair with Sally Hemings. It won the WGA
oh,
award
sure, yeah.
and NAACP award for best miniseries. And then from there, I went over to Granada Entertainment, which was England's biggest media company. I was a VP there, working on co-productions and selling
Great.
a lot of TV projects here, and getting remake rights for successful shows in the
Interesting.
UK.
Okay.
And then
So
I
you
went-
were
yeah.
responsible for acquiring the rights to that material?
Really mining their library.
Okay.
So, because they were the biggest supplier for content to networks in the UK. And actually, one of the projects that they had made and aired on ITV was called Hot Money. And it was about 3 women who stole money from the Bank of England.
Mad Money.
So when I saw it, I
Oh,
said,
got it.
this is
Okay.
a great idea for
Yeah.
an American remake. I took it to CAA, and we wound up selling it to a company based in MGM.
Okay.
And
That was after you packaged it, though? You sold
that
it? or-
actually, well, there we had great source material, and how I pitched it, I said this is like a female Ocean's 11
Okay.
meets First Wives Club.
Got it.
With a broader demographic, because it was 3 women from totally different walks of life
Right.
and different age groups.
Wasn't it like, let me see if I can get it right. It was Katie Holmes, Queen Latifah, and
Diane Keaton.
Diane. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I was going to say it when you.
Yeah.
All right.
And MGM said if Callie Curry comes on board, that was their first choice. If she comes on board, we'll definitely make the movie. She
Okay.
did come on board. Everything that could possibly have gone right with it went right. And then just when they were about to give it a green light, we had Queen Latifah, Diane Keaton, shortly after they had big box office movies. And then MGM was up for sale. And Sony was
Right.
acquiring it, and they froze all their assets, so it was in limbo for 5 years.
So you lost the heat from their big.
No,
hits.
basically, oh yeah, exactly.
The talent,
yes.
I mean, yeah.
But then, interestingly, Chris McGurk, who had been the head of MGM, then 5 years later had started a small studio called Overture
Oh, I've heard of
Pictures or
Overture.
Films.
Sure.
And this was the first movie that he acquired and released.
Okay.
So
So you were
things
still on
come
as a
around.
producer
Yes.
then? Okay.
And that's actually an important little anecdote.
Yeah.
When you're a producer and you have set up a project, you always want to make sure that you're attached in turnaround.
Right.
So-
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, so you were doing all this
Yeah.
industry work. You know what? Let's
Yes.
let's pour the
Oh,
wine.
yes.
Let's.
And
I
we-
know
should we
Wendy's
say a
been
quick
asking.
thank you to the
A
sponsor.
huge thank you to Steel Wines. And you can't quite see that very well, but this is a very beautiful Pinot Noir.
Oh, I'm so excited. I get to be the recipient of a good Pinot Noir.
This is, it's not part of their writer's block vintage, but this is a nice high-end Pinot that we'll just take a look at here.
I've got to do this more often.
Right? Just sit around and talk
Yeah.
about movies in the industry.
Yes.
Cheers. Thank you, Steel Wines, our amazing sponsor.
Yes. Cheers.
Cheers. Thank you for being here, Wendy. Thank
Thank
you,
you for
everybody who
having
is
me.
here and watching on
Cheers.
Facebook, listening on podcast. We see Suzanne Prescott says, welcome, Wendy. Suzanne's one of our regulars.
Thank you, Suzanne.
We've got Wendy's link up there. Oh my God, I just got here, almost missed. Hi, EJ, Michael. I love this segment. Thanks, EJ.
This is really fun.
It's fun,
Cheers.
right?
Yes.
I know, I
Oh,
haven't
here,
taken a
cheers.
sip.
Cheers. Cheers to everybody out there.
Mm. Ooh, there it is.
It smells really nice.
Ooh, that was really yummy. I want to put that down just for a second. Let's see, who do we have? Michael, love that you gave me an excuse to drink. We usually don't need an excuse, Michael, but if this is one of them, it's great. Placed in Table Read, Austin. Very cool, very exciting.
Wow,
Michael.
congratulations. That's great.
There's our link to Steel Wines. All right, so what we're talking about is we have some people join us. I just saw my brother-in-law, Aaron Schwiebert, join. Welcome, Aaron. But we have industry and creative consultant Wendy Kram with us. She was just kind of talking about some of her previous days working for some industry, companies and how you eventually made your way. So after Overture, what happened with Overture?
Well, let's see. So at that point, I had 2 movies that got made that year, and I decided that I was on my own. And
Let me ask
Yes.
before you move on
Please.
this. So were you like on set producing, or were you kind of in the office producing?
more of I did the heavy lifting really from the top part. So
Okay.
just like brief recap, when I had seen the movie Hot Money that was done with British cast,
Yeah.
aired on ITV in England, I said, this is a really good concept for an American remake.
Right.
And it's funny because, of course, this was shortly after Ocean's 11. So I did say this is like, female Ocean's 11. Obviously now they've done a real one.
Yeah.
And so there was kind of a high concept there, and people could look at the movie and see a proven concept. And so it was, because a lot of the hardest thing to sell right now is an abstract idea.
Yeah, right, because
Or
it's unproven.
Yeah, or
Yeah.
like an original idea that's a pitch, unless of course you're Aaron Sorkin or
Right.
Shane Black.
And even they
Yeah.
are writing on spec sometimes,
Yeah. So and my understanding is when Miramax first started, their model was not to do any development. Someone who's no longer, in the business, but did build a big company. I feel like it's like Voldemort. He
Yeah, we
shall
can't,
not
yes.
be named.
He who is she, I.
sure.
Well, I agree. I think we all know what
Yeah.
we're talking about.
But
Yeah.
they were very successful, and they never put money into development because it's too risky.
Mm-hmm.
So you hear an idea, and even among top screenwriters, and if you have to pay $500,000 back then to $1 million or more, then and what if the script doesn't turn out right?
Right.
I've had friends who've been high level studio executives and have hired very expensive writers when the scripts just haven't turned out.
Yeah.
And it happens all the time.
It's huge risk.
Yeah.
There's a very likely possibility of getting literally nothing for your money.
Yeah. And it used to be with studios. I remember when I first started in the business and was at Disney, my boss used to sell, he was a master salesman, and he could sell projects just like on a log line or a sentence. But studios used to develop a lot then, and with the change in the,
Studio structure.
and the
Yeah.
economy, they're just not putting projects into development like that.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
and as we know and have seen, they're mostly buying just intellectual property, IP, graphic novels,
Right.
best-selling books.
And what that kind of means is, I'm just looking at some of the comments. Aaron says, no wine in the house fetching whiskey. That's good. Okay. As long as you got something. But ironically, since the mid to late, well, the whole 90s, and then once 9/11 happened, everything changed,
Right.
you know.
In 2008.
2008 was even worse, but even before 2008, the studios started to get purchased by these major corporations, and those corporations were like, what are you spending all this money on? And you've spent millions of dollars on, I don't even see any you know, result. And so that all just ended. And now there's been a little bit, like you're saying, not a little bit, a huge focus on IP, existing material, true stories, etc. But now the onus is on the writers to spend their own money on their own development.
Right.
You have to, otherwise you're going to be trying to submit a second or third draft around town, and you've maybe received notes from a writer's group. Unless the thing is unbelievable and you're a gifted writer, it's just, I'm sorry, but good luck. You know, you never know, it can happen, but you need to be doing these things like Michael is saying, and placing in Austin in all these huge contests and trying to get accolades. We're going to talk about that. So anyway, you ended up moving to the consulting realm, but you're still producing.
Yes.
Yeah. So
So
but
I
it's
feel
just
that they're
independent.
complementary, and in fact, two clients who came to me through LA for Hire, I thought they were really talented writers. They came to me initially to have, they actually placed well in Austin, and that opened a lot of doors for them, and they weren't sure how to navigate with all the people that they had met, and
So how do you leverage that? You know, I mean, yeah.
So, well, I read, I started reading their work. I read two of their scripts and really liked their writing.
Were you with a separate company at the time, or
No, I was on my own as an independent producer,
Got it.
but I also was doing
Okay.
consulting, because so many people would ask me to read scripts, and I just can't do that full time.
it's
yeah.
so time consuming, not just to read,
Yeah.
but actually go through it and
provide notes.
help,
Yeah.
not just coverage. you
Right.
know, yeah.
Oh yeah. So anyway, I really liked their script, and I felt that there was a market for it. It was based on a true story, a real character, and there was a genre component. It was about a serial killer.
Yeah.
But it was also was really an interesting character-driven piece. And so I said, I would love to take this around. So we wound up doing a shopping agreement where I was attached as a producer, and I started managing them. And I took it around to different companies. And I think this isn't like name dropping. It's just important to know the buyer.
Name drop. We love name dropping.
To know, I mean, it's, part of my business, but
Yeah.
I mean, just to know, it's really important is to know
The
the
players.
buyer.
Yeah.
Of course, know the players, although I feel like it's so hard to keep up because
There's so many players
there's so many
nowadays.
now.
Yeah.
And people keep changing, and it's hard to keep,
Right.
changing jobs, keep track of who's going where. But so I sent it to a production company, and they wound up passing, but they really liked the writing, and they said the reason we passed is we have another serial killer project in development. We're not going to do two,
Right.
but your taste is right on the money with what we're looking for. So that helped create an open door for the
Right, a
future
relationship.
and a relationship. And another executive right now who I sent a project, who I have a total open door with. I had a project that was co-written by Oscar-winning actor and this is kind of a funny story, and showrunner. And when they came to me to see if I'd like to get involved, and I read the pilot, and I was like, oh my God, this is so good. But before I get excited, I was like, you're so and so, and you're so and so. Why do you need me?
Yeah. Right.
And they said because it was not it was really sitting on the shelf with their agents, and because the agents basically didn't want to shop something that's not, they had clients who get concrete offers. So it's more easy, low-hanging fruit than
Sure.
to be shopping things all
Yeah.
over the place. But there's an executive who to this day. Like he called me a year later, saying, "By the way, what's going on with that script?" And he still wound up not optioning it. But it's like anytime I call him, I feel very lucky or fortunate. He goes, "Yeah, what you got? You have such good taste." So it's just definitely important if you're a writer, when you're submitting material, to really know that your script's been vetted
Right.
by industry professionals,
Yeah,
whether it's friends who are assistants at agencies or for producers or
Yeah.
creative executives, and to use your resources. So,
Yeah.
because if you send something that's mediocre, then people aren't going to be as
It could
inclined
be a closed
to,
door, totally. Yeah.
And,
Well, let's
go ahead.
look at some of the comments, and then I just want to talk about just some of our other sponsors and
Right.
some
Yes.
opportunities that we have. We don't want to forget about them. But let's see what we have for comments, just to say hi to everybody here. Jess Bickhart, welcome. Molly Cash. Let's
Hi,
see what we
Molly.
got here. Michael says, to really have a relationship, yeah, this is a business, but it's a business of people, totally. EJ says, I thought maybe I should find an illustrator to get people my story drawn. Most people probably don't read anymore, but they all charge money. Yeah, true. So as a poor, unknown, uneducated individual, I thought making audio scripts, I could produce them myself. And I got to see more here. Stand out at truck stops and try to get truckers to listen to my stories. That could possibly get my name out there. That could spark producers or need for the script. Any way you can get your name out there, EJ, in a positive way is a good thing. I don't think Hollywood's paying attention to truck stops. I don't mean that in any negative way, but unless you have a huge story about a truck stop, I think ultimately what Wendy and I are both saying is that any way you can get an accolade by submitting to a contest, trying to win something, anything, get some people behind you, reach out. We're going to talk about cold querying and the approach to that, and how you can best utilize your own uniqueness, even though you haven't maybe reached any accolades yet. We'll get there in a second. Mary Davis, welcome. Let's see. Sorry you're late, Mary. It's okay. We know you're always going to be here anyway. All right, so let's talk about our sponsors. As you can see, obviously, we have Movie Maker, one of the best industry magazines out there. You should definitely check out Movie Maker. And that's kind of, along the lines of what EJ is saying. It's about educating yourself. The more you read about what's going around town, knowing the names of all the people that are making decisions in town, just having that mental Rolodex and having an understanding of what these people want and what they're looking for. What are the trends now? How do you think those trends might change later? You don't necessarily want to be writing to those trends, but just understanding what the industry is doing. You need to do that. And Movie Maker is one of these magazines that's going to help you at least understand what's going on in the industry. It's going to give you some technical things, in terms of got a whole bunch of different production services and all these things. But you should go to Movie Maker, and if you can get a discount on their 1-year digital subscription with the Sizzle MM code. And you know what, James, our social media expert. Oh, good. There it is. Yeah, the link is in there. Thank you, James. So you guys can go there. You can check out Movie Maker. If you want to buy a year subscription, you can get a discount. But thank you, Movie Maker, for being one of our sponsors. But then, as it was mentioned in the comments, Table Read My Screenplay is one of our contests. The early deadline for the Park City. I don't know if you know what we do with Table Read My Screenplay, but we put on table reads in different cities.
Right, for different festivals. Yeah.
We try to go to festival-oriented locations. Usually it's in tandem. This most recent one in Hollywood was with the Hollywood Pitch Fest, so it wasn't necessarily a contest, but it was where people are congregating. Obviously in Park City, that's where the Sundance Film Festival is. So if you end up winning Table Read My Screenplay, you'll end up going to Park City with us during the Sundance Film Festival. The early deadline is September 27th at midnight, so that's tomorrow night. Your first entry is only $29, and if you enter additional scripts beyond the first, it's only $19. And as far as screenplay contests, it's pretty cheap. And then, of course, we want to try to push one of our other contests called Shoot Your Sizzle. So if you submit a TV pilot or a feature, I don't think they accept shorts, and end up winning, just like any other contest, what you win is a literal production of a sizzle or trailer of your either show or movie. It's a pretty big deal. Kind of like what EJ was saying is that, you know, if people don't really like to read stuff, if they can watch a 2.5, 3-minute video as opposed to reading an entire
Well,
script.
I think, yeah, a sizzle reel can, if there is a script and it lends itself to a sizzle reel, that can become a very effective sales tool.
Totally. Like what I'm looking at in terms of my notes here, but Damien Chazelle, he did a short scene from
That's
Whiplash,
right.
and that's what helped sell Whiplash, and then Whiplash ended up becoming this festival darling, and it did incredibly well in you know, as far as the critical acclaim. What had happened? It said it was entered at Sundance. It was so well received. He got a producer and funding of $3.3 million. It was eventually nominated for an Oscar. Obviously, he went on to make La La Land, and now we've got First Man. I mean, so Damien Chazelle, not that his career was necessarily made just because of the sizzle, but it certainly helped.
Absolutely.
So you can go to shootyoursIzzle.com. It's only $35 to enter. You can use our Wine Wednesday code. It's just WINEWED to save $10. It's only $25 for your early entry deadline before November 1st, so there's still some time. And then we want to highlight a writing gig that it's on our website right now. And if you're a Connect member, which you should be, it's only $10 a month with the ISA, but you'll have access to the writing gigs, and the writing gigs are getting better and better. A lot of the gigs are, you know, either low or no pay. Let's kind of collaborate stuff, which is still great for no experienced writers. But there are some writing gigs on there. Recently, there was one where a company was looking for a TV writer with 5 years of comedy writing experience. It was $5,000 a week for like up to 3 months or so. It was a lot of money. That was a solid gig. But then we've got one on here. Danny Roth is a producer. He produced the Woody Harrelson film LBJ. It was directed by Rob Reiner. He's got a faith and family friendly movie of the week scripts that he needs. And you have to submit to that writing gig by September 30th. He's probably already received quite a few. But the budget that's the little twist. It's only $400,000. So it has to be a very low budget movie of the week kind of thing.
I know of one.
You know of one. Great. No, we should be submitting some, you know, other writers to this. But Danny also recently optioned 2 Christmas movies through our writing gigs page. So there are very real people posting those writing gigs, so you should be, you know, paying attention. We're going to be trying to grow that writing gigs list as much as we can. But I will say, just behind the scenes, I got a little text from our director of operations. Molly says that the code I just gave to everyone was for one person to win a free year.
Oh.
So hold on. So please tell people the code. Okay, so sorry. Now I'm going totally behind the curtain here. Just disregard the Shoot Your Sizzle code that I gave you. What we have to do is give that code away as a prize. So maybe we will ask some trivia questions at the end.
Okay, fine.
This is what happens when Felicity isn't here. She's usually organizing these things. All right, I will remember to do that. We'll give that code. Maybe, hold on, you know what, the problem is everybody listening to the podcast is like, what's happening? If they want to email me, I can try to get a code, but we don't have the discount for. All right, so this is what we're going to do. And I apologize to Movie Maker because they're willing to give a year's worth of a digital subscription away. We're going to cancel out that code. And I'm going to talk to Molly and we'll figure out a way to give that year's subscription away. But regardless, you should still be reading Movie Maker. All right, anyway, so back to what we were talking about. So you are now working regularly. I mean, you're coaching writers on a regular basis on a creative level,
I was going to say what was exciting with these clients was that so I had identified different production companies that I thought that do this type of movie and would respond, and it wound up getting set up with anonymous content. And what was really great was based on their work on that project, and they were hired to do a rewrite, that they, the executive anonymous was so impressed that he actually offered them a book to adapt. So, so that's where
a writing assignment came out of the
LA for Hire came with an option and a writing assignment.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
LA for Hire is Wendy's company, by the way. You can go to LA.
Wendy Kram. Kram.
Yeah.
Yes.
So you can either Google Wendy Kram or go to LA, the number 4hire.com. You can there's a whole bunch of testimonials on there. But this is, how many hours a week do you put in for all this?
I mean, it's like people on weekend, like I was meeting with a writer who I've had a project with in the past and is a friend, and She just sent me, she's just done a book proposal, and she kept saying, I want to take up your busy weekend, you know, and she's like, I know what it's like to work a full week, and
My
then you want your
writers say
weekends
that too,
free.
yeah.
I have to take, for me, like, when I do my most amount of concentrated reading is the weekends, because I don't have the interruption of,
Right.
you know, business calls during
Yeah.
the week. So weekends, so when you ask how many hours, it's constant.
Yeah, it's every day.
Yeah. And Saturday, so I'm reading very often Saturdays and Sundays. Last week I had meetings with like 3 different groups of writers. So, but
So you
I
have
really,
groups of writers that you go to?
oh, they were a
as well?
writing team.
Oh, got it.
So
Okay.
I met with them.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
it's like whatever, you know,
How
whatever.
often are you meeting in person with the writers?
I would say probably a couple a week.
Oh.
And then I do have clients internationally and in other cities, so we
Yeah.
do Skype calls or
Right.
phone calls.
Yeah. All my
So, yeah.
work is done via phone because
Right.
I've taken on so many writers that I
Yeah.
just can't. You got to at least allocate a half an
Right.
hour just to get to somewhere.
Oh, I make them come to me.
That's true. That's true. I should have them
Yeah.
come here. But nonetheless, you know.
No, and what was the other thing? Oh, but it's true. Even in LA, and well, even if it's going between where I live, Santa Monica, and Beverly Hills or West
Oh,
Hollywood,
yeah.
I usually do phone calls.
Yeah.
Most
Oh,
of my
while
business.
you're driving, right.
Yeah, or no, I do. I mean, honestly, today with the internet and everything,
Yeah.
you can be on a mountaintop in, you know, in Sicily or
Yeah, right,
Colorado,
yeah,
whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I went
so-
a little more
Which
domestic.
I haven't done, but it's
Mhm.
like an aspiration, I think.
Well, I mean, I thought about that. You know, like my parents, of course, we're just going on this total tangent, I guess. But you know, my dad, when I went home for the summer, said something like, "So there's nothing that can get you to move back home, huh?" And I'm like, "Oh, first of all, that's painful," because I knew he meant that from love. It's not, you know, but I still, since I work from home, I could technically do this
Right.
from anywhere.
Mhm.
But it's just a different vibe
Yeah,
when you
right.
kind of have to be in the mix of it all.
I think so.
Especially if you're actually going out and producing projects, you have to be willing and ready to go take a meeting. How
Right.
often are you taking meetings with people,
I
like
mean, it's-
executives?
I'm really on an as-needed basis
Right, right.
because I do so much by phone. So even if it's
You've
like,
established
if
your
it's
relationships
yeah.
already, so yeah, you don't have
Yeah.
to take generals and stuff. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's true. All right, so
So,
we'll get into
yes.
some of the topics, right? So you
Okay.
wanted to talk about packaging. Why don't you actually? You know what? Before
Yeah.
we get there, I had a question as you were kind of talking about some of your backstory. Just for everybody watching, maybe try to explain the difference between a shopping agreement and an option. There isn't that much of one.
I think, I
but-
mean, I'm not an attorney, but I have definitely, and I've done many, many deals, so I do feel
you got the
pretty
know-how.
fluent
Yeah.
about them. I really use them interchangeably because a shopping agreement is basically you were giving me permission, you were giving me an option. Usually they're exclusive
Yeah.
for a limited amount of time. So for 6 months, 9 months, a year to take, and the way I structure them is permission to submit the project to agents, studio executives or streaming provider executives, production companies and so on, and to present the writer, the owner, the creator, the client with
Right.
a deal.
And you're pretty much doing the same exact thing with an option. But the option is a little more beneficial to a writer because they might be able to be paid for that option.
There's free options all the time.
All the time. Oh,
Yeah,
dollar
I mean-
options happen more often than not.
Yeah, I mean, I know many major companies that do, it's called like it's also called an if come deal. So it's like if it gets set up, then the money comes. But you
Sure,
can have
okay.
things in place, so if this project gets set up, there's a $5,000 option fee or $25,000 option fee
Right.
against a purchase price when the project goes into production. That's when you get the big money.
Right.
Unless you're
right.
like John Grisham or Stephen King and someone might do a purchase outright.
Which they deserve.
Right, because they're proven,
Totally proven.
yeah, it's, you know, one hit after another, and that's another thing with the reason why, I mean, it can be frustrating for a lot of writers when we see that so many of the studios just want to buy best-selling books or, you know, from the DC or Marvel universe, but that's because if they're going to spend, you know, $100 million or $200 million, they know that there's a built-in audience
Totally.
of people who are going to come and fill the seats and or, you know, order Netflix and so on, because obviously in Netflix there's a lot in from the Marvel universe in terms of series. So, but then it's okay. Well, how does that relate to me, who's
The writer.
a writer who, or me, you know, Wendy, who doesn't have deep pockets like a studio to buy Marvel and so on. It's what do you have that is unique and really can distinguish you. It was interesting because I was reading about an article recently that appeared in Epic magazine that Apple bought, and it's about immigrants, and it got a really big cast, and it's like, just to even have something
It was a
published.
movie that they were
It
writing.
was an article that they optioned, and I think
Oh,
it's going to be a
interesting.
limited series.
Cool.
But even so, if you know, you like, I mean, there's kind of a hierarchy of what Hollywood buys. So I'd say the first is intellectual property, best-selling book, comic book. There's an interesting story behind Cowboys and Aliens. My understanding is that it was initially pitched to an
I know
agent,
the story, yeah.
and the agent was like, "That's a really cool idea," but it wasn't until they had turned it into a graphic novel, and I think one of the creators might have owned a graphic, you know, company, and just even the talk about turning it into a graphic novel, and maybe even having a mock-up of what it would look like.
Sure.
Then when you have something tangible that you
Totally.
can show, that's when
That's
it's
why
sold.
the sizzles are so big. It's why pitch books are so important.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it really depends. Like if you have a half-hour sitcom, you do not. I tell people you don't need to use your resources, expenses, time, equity
Right.
doing a lookbook.
Yeah.
It's really if it's a unique world.
Yeah.
And like if it's a different, you know, it's
If
about
it's a Stranger
zombies, or
Things,
Stranger
yeah.
Things, which was one of the best lookbooks.
So, oh my God, I have it on my computer.
Yeah.
And I think that went around
Yeah.
town to everybody. It was originally called Montauk, and they did such a great thematic,
Absolutely.
tonal approach to here. Look, even using images from E.T., just like look at this shot from E.T. This is what we want it to look like. And so there was this feeling that the person would get when they're looking and reading through
Right.
this pitch book, like, oh, I think I see what you're trying to do. Yes, it's a monster movie or a show, but it's set in the 80s and it's a callback to the 80s.
Right,
And
exactly.
that was why I watched the show.
Yeah.
That was why I tuned in, because when I had not heard of Stranger Things at all,
Mm-hmm.
just because maybe I was living under a rock before the first season came out, and I just saw the Stranger Things logo, how the letters were written,
Right.
and then that total 80s music that came
Right.
through the theme. I'm like, I'm in, man. I'm watching this show.
Right.
I don't even care if it's terrible, you know.
Right.
And that's what a pitch book can do.
Yeah. And they had such a strong vision, and then even if you got rid of the visuals, which were great, I thought the text
Yeah,
was
the story
so
was
well thought
totally,
out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I think it's a testament to how smart the really successful people are. They,
And that was an original idea.
Yeah.
So when you have an original idea, you have to really put that much more
Right.
labor into constructing.
there was a little bit of a back and forth that they had, didn't they? There was some kind of, somebody claimed that they stole the idea or something,
I don't know.
and I think it got tossed out. But you know, that happens so often. We're like, oh, I had this idea. Like I was writing, just to go off on another tangent, but I was writing this, you know, big budget kind of movie adventure about this bloodline of Christ and Mary Magdalene and stuff. And I had done all this research. I was nobody, you know, and I'm still not in terms of, you know, as a writer and, you know, well known by any means. At the time I had barely started. And then Dan Brown released, you know, DaVinci Code maybe less than a year later. It was pretty much the same story because Dan Brown, you could loosely argue, adapted the book Holy Blood, Holy Grail and turned it into a movie.
Right.
Loose, you know, I'm not going to try to call out any legal things. And I was kind of trying to do the same thing. I'm not going to claim that Dan Brown stole my idea. The
Right,
guy
yeah.
knocked it out of the park. He did it so much better than I could have. And so it's just silly. When anytime a writer says something like, well, I don't want people to steal my idea, and I'm like, first of all, they're not going to.
I know my experience, and I've been in the business over 20 years.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it doesn't happen,
Right.
but I've never had anything stolen, and I've never had, and yeah, and also there are things that just kind of surface around the same time, like
In the ether.
yeah, like remember when the movie, this maybe before a lot of people's time, but the movie Big with Tom Hanks,
Sure.
that I think it was Penny Marshall. There were like 3 other body changes,
Right.
experiences,
Like
and
Father,
then
Like Son, I think was one of them.
and there've been Jennifer Garner was in a switched
13
one. There've
going
been,
on 30. Yeah.
So so it's, to me also, that's why there are some original ideas, but there aren't that many. So that's why it's really about the execution.
Right. Yes. It's all about the execution. We've
Yeah.
got Bella meowing in the back, probably asking us to just move on.
Okay.
What's the next topic? Let's just look at the
But
comments.
I mean, something that did come up, like we were talking about, if it's something that's based on a true story, is that whatever you have that's unique, that creates an auspice, Hollywood does love true stories.
Oh yeah.
Because
yeah.
I feel like it's actor bait.
Mhm.
Whether it's something like Harvey Milk or the
First Man, as you could
First
argue.
Man,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
So and a lot of times, I've seen also people who have either optioned a book or something might be based on a book that they've written,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe it's even been a bestseller, or it's been critically acclaimed.
Right.
Make sure when you have a treatment or in your query, like the subject heading, Amazon best-selling book,
Right.
or true crime thriller.
Right.
And
Right.
you want to make sure that you're highlighting those auspices.
That's one thing
yeah.
Wendy does when she's working with her clients is how do we arrange the subject line in your query to make sure that an executive who gets 100+ emails every day doesn't just overlook it, but then also how to arrange the query letter so that you're saying the right things in the right amount of time and space, and you're not overdoing it, and you're not making yourself look like not only
Right.
a crazy person, but just naive and green. People
Right.
don't really want to, even if you've had all of these successes, contest wins, an executive may still go, this guy's overbearing, or this
Right.
girl is like trying too hard, or something. That you can tell when there's
Right.
this level of, that person doesn't
Right.
get it. you know?
That's true, because they're definitely, and I'm sure people have heard this before, but there's a fine line between definitely selling and highlighting any accolades, recognitions,
Yeah.
and so on,
And-
but
but then
also
also
being
how.
authentic
Yeah,
and
right.
humble. I respond, like when people say, queries are a waste of time. I've hired people from queries.
Mhm.
I've helped clients get jobs by constructing queries, and it's but they're people that I've hired, they were able to highlight what their accomplishments were, but in a tone that was very authentic and
Yeah,
humble.
right. And also in that person's voice a little bit. You can get a sense of who someone is just by how they're arranging the email. Like one of my writers, she's been doing it a very long time. You could call her a veteran, really, but she, had a couple nice contest wins. She had 2 movies that were produced, from scripts that she had written. Neither of them were huge. They didn't really get that much notoriety. They didn't make any money, whatever. But she did and this was recent. Maybe 5, maybe even less, 4 months ago. And she said, I'd like to start querying managers. Is that even possible? We talked through it. I said, of course. Try to, pick 12, 15 different smaller, relatively boutique, so to speak, management companies. And write a query letter asking people if they would be willing to read her. Don't
Right.
just send stuff to
Yes, exactly.
'Cause they're-
that's a
people
sign
are
of a
like-
novice.
yeah.
That's
And then she
and
just-
that gets deleted.
Totally gets late. Also because they don't want to be blamed for, I sent you that script and you ended up making a movie
Right.
that's kind of like it. And they're like, no, that's just too much trouble.
Right.
So this writer just, put her accolades. Here's who I am. This is the kind of writer I am. Here are some of the projects just in terms of tone and genre. I'd love it to either, get a
Right.
phone call with you or have a
Perfect.
meeting. And she had, out of I think 12 or 15 of the people, I think 4 responded.
Right.
One of them was the president of Heroes and Villains, and they ended up signing her.
That's fantastic.
And she's been taking meetings everywhere over the past 2 or 3 weeks. She hasn't sold
That's
anything
great.
yet, but those relationships, in my opinion, are worth just as much or even more than the sale of a script, because that's going to get you more jobs down the line.
Right.
And she's great in a room, and she's really friendly, and she's a woman, and all this stuff. But anyway,
Yeah.
so I think,
Yes.
well, actually, let's look at some of the
Okay.
comments here. Michael says, let's see. Well, Michael's asking where is home. Oh, sorry, I'm a little slow on the comments here, guys. Wisconsin. My parents are
Oh,
about
yeah,
an
I was
hour.
curious about that too.
My parents are about an
Yeah.
hour or so north of Chicago. I grew up in a tiny little farm town, basically.
Oh,
Let's see, people forget they have an imagination. It's always business, business. I think if we emotionally reach people first, then we can talk about business. Our own personal stories first. Yeah, the personal story is always more interesting. Let's see, natural spinner of tales. Thanks, Michael. Kevin says, so where can I find that lookbook for Stranger Things? It's a good question. I hesitate to, I don't feel I am, someone sent that to me kind of in
you might
confidence.
be able to find it online because it's.
You could, I bet somebody posted it.
Yeah, and another one, Winona Earp is a really long one, but I found that it's beautiful.
Interesting.
And the thing is, it doesn't have to be as polished. Like that one was super, super polished.
Yeah.
But you could probably Google.
Lookbook
Best
or pitch
lookbooks,
book
pitch
examples.
decks, yeah.
Four movies specifically. Let's see, EJ is saying.
Or series.
Or sure, or
Yeah.
right. Stranger Things obviously is there was also one where the actor that played Arthur was in one. Let's see. Well, my TV pilot's based on a true memoir. There you go.
Good, that's great.
Yeah.
And is it that's EJ or who's that from?
Michael is saying.
Oh, is it your own memoir? Oh, it's on yours. That's great.
Yeah, you're true. Yeah, that is definitely good.
And I'm curious, is it published?
Hopefully it's published. Yeah, hopefully you at least have a platform there, Michael. Where I'm getting down.
And then again, humble, so key. True.
Yeah. Mary says, "What a great story! Everyone wants to discover the next great writer, for sure." If we are to write about a famous real life person, how does the copyright work?
Oh,
Do
good.
we need
Okay.
the real life person
Really
to give
good
us the
question.
rights? Yeah.
It really depends if that person is public domain and if they passed away. If it's your next door neighbor, you probably, and they've done something that you think is, pretty remarkable, you probably would need to get their rights.
They're called life rights. You can Google how do I attain somebody's
Right.
life rights. You're going to need a lawyer, or at least some form of written permission from the
Right.
person.
Yeah.
Some contract that you're.
I've done that actually a lot of time. One time, this was years and years ago, when I was at Hearse Entertainment, I was at home on a Friday night watching 48 Hours, I think it was, and it was a landmark law case involving sexual abuse, 4 sisters who wound up suing their father, who happened to have been an FBI agent and national authority on child abuse. And I saw the story and I was so amazed. And this was a Friday night. I called Monday morning to 48 Hours.
So
and
if 48 Hours was a show or something?
it was sort of like Dateline or...
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
So you just called somebody. How did you get somebody's number?
Okay,
at
so
48
I called... So it was CBS. I called CBS
Okay.
in New York, and I asked for the offices for 48 Hours. And then when I called, I said I want to speak to the. This is before I think even like we were able to look everything up so easily on the internet. I said I want to speak to the segment producer of that episode. So they put me in touch with her, and I may have left a voicemail saying that I was at Hearst Entertainment at the time. They were like the king of TV movies.
Yeah.
And I said that I was really interested in talking to the women to see if they'd be open to telling their story as a movie for television. Yeah.
And what happened?
And they had their lawyer call me.
Okay.
And then I did a packet of why Hearst was so wonderful, and my boss, who was a prominent television director.
Okay.
And so I sent that, and then we flew them out, and there was competition. There were like 4 or 5 other TV production companies who were meeting with them, and they chose us.
Unbelievable.
Now, I don't, I've been in that situation several times, and you don't always win, but you try and you put your best foot forward.
Right. What are you going to do? I mean,
yeah.
still that's fun and exciting. I
Yeah,
watch.
I love the chase of that. And to be honest, what we would do was we'd call it, because then it became a bidding situation.
Sure.
So we would call the network and say, are you interested in the story? And then once we knew that a network was interested, then then the production company knew that they could up the offer.
Okay. Interesting.
So, yeah.
Oh man, it's a fun game, man. I watch a lot of these ghost investigation and like haunted paranormal shows, and there have been 2 stories in some. I think one of the shows is like My Haunted House or something, But there have been 2 stories on that My Haunted House show that would make amazing movies. And the funny thing is that I wonder if some of them are actually real. Like I don't even know if the people that are on screen are the real people.
Right.
So I guess you could just try to reach out to somebody and say, look, what is the story?
And then here's the cool thing. Let's say you did get the rights. Then if you want, I'm exaggerating, but this is, I don't know if I'm exaggerating, like a possible strategy, if you were to call, let's say Blumhouse and say, hi, my name is Max Tim. I just acquired the rights to a ghost story that aired on...
Okay. My Haunted House.
Yeah, and what network is that?
I think Sci-Fi or something.
On
Travel
Sci-Fi.
Channel,
and I would love to run it by such and such executive.
Yeah.
And when you're making a cold call, you're not calling the head of the company or
Right.
the senior VP. You want to get someone more entry level.
Yeah.
And probably what they will say is, I'm sorry, we don't take unsolicited submissions.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I like to hedge off is to say that, I'd be willing to sign a submission release form.
Right.
But do consult with your attorney, because I'm not an attorney, so I can't say you should sign it no matter what.
Right.
But, most people who are making submissions in the business, if you don't have an agent, it is required from, a lot of people in order to look at your material.
And that's kind of off on another little tangent in terms of this whole idea of unsolicited material. I feel like most, and maybe this is just my residual anger, just from the town. I feel like most executives and people around town use that as just an excuse to not want to read something.
No, I think it's because there's just so much material coming into them.
What is solicited then?
Oh, when an agent, it's
So
coming
it
from
has
a
to
known
be from a
source,
known
and it
source.
means that it's been vetted. If an agent, I've certainly had a share of scripts that have, what's not even relevant anymore,
Yeah, right,
but
right.
like a long time ago that agents, it was easier to get an agent, and I've certainly read scripts that I didn't think were that good, but there's another rung of having it been vetted.
Mm-hmm. Well, the irony is that with the ISA and what we're trying to do in terms of helping our writers get their material out there, we are being the
Right.
solicitor. And a lot of times I've had people say, well, we don't accept unsolicited material. I'm like, no,
Right.
is solicited, you know what I mean?
Right. But then it's saying that, your managing director, whatever, of, International Screenwriters Association, the client just won
Saying
the table
it the
read
right
my
way.
screenplay
Yeah,
in
yeah.
Austin. Sometimes it does require
Yeah.
a little bit of explaining. And the
Right.
thing is that person who maybe was standoffish, it's like the floodgates, they have to,
They have to put those
create
walls
some,
up.
yeah. But when you start talking to them in a rational way, and
Yeah.
that happened to me recently where I had a project with Anonymous and I was submitting to a director at a production company and the assistant said, we don't take unsolicited material. And I said, oh, I totally get that. I said, but, I manage clients who have had, and I can mention movies that they've done.
Right.
And actors that have been in it, and I said, and it's with anonymous content. I said, we usually don't, he said, need to sign a submission release form. And I just said, oh, I understand, except that if that's from someone who, doesn't have a track record and so on.
Right.
And then they said, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't realize.
That's funny.
And then the
Okay.
thing is, you send something, and then you start to develop rapport and relationship.
But then again, what's wrong with signing a release form? Even like, why wouldn't
Well,
you?
I mean, I've had times where it's they're not all are the same. I require submission release forms.
Yeah.
But a person still will have their own copyright protections. If, for example, you see someone makes a movie that's like ripped off verbatim
Sure. of
dialogue,
course.
characters,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
so
yeah.
on. But if it's it's a supernatural switch to birth love story,
Right.
yeah,
You
that
can't
was like
protect that.
yeah.
Yeah.
So
Let's see what we got. We have maybe 10 minutes.
Okay.
Let's see what we got here. What if you don't have a writer's resume? Cash it. I think
Well,
you need to create one.
I think you have to build one, and I'm not sure
Yeah.
exactly what that means. In that, let's say, I'm making stuff up, but let's say you're a lawyer or a retired lawyer, and you had a really interesting case, or you have a really interesting personal story, then you can sell that.
Right.
Let's say you're a housewife who invented, what was the movie that David O. Russell did with Jennifer Lawrence?
Is that Winter's Bone?
No. The where she was creating an invention.
Yes. It was like one word.
Yeah. Oh, it was the name of the woman. But I mean, so
Yeah.
if you want to be a serious screenwriter, then you have to build a resume, and that can be starting to collect accolades from film festivals, and or you have other resources. So, for example, the guy who wrote I don't want to say it on your podcast,
Right.
My Dad Said.
Oh yeah, shit. My dad said.
Shit, My Dad
Yeah,
Said.
yeah.
He was just tweeting. He had a Twitter feed, and
Right,
it was
right.
so funny. And all of a sudden, lo and behold, a production company optioned his rights and then put him.
They made a show out of it.
Yeah, they made a shot of it.
Yeah, it wasn't very good, but
Yeah.
I think the quickest answer, which you're probably not going to like to hear, Kesh, is write as many scripts as you can.
Mhm.
And honestly, I had a producer
yeah.
say once that you're not really a screenwriter until you've written 10 screenplays. I think it was kind of an asshole thing for him to say to a new screenwriter who is asking him about this, but I understand what he's saying. You want to try to get as many pieces down so that you understand your voice, you understand the stories you want to tell, because you improve with every script thereafter. And what Wendy is saying is just try to gain those accolades by winning some smaller contests, try to work your way to mid-level contests. Don't start at the Nichols, don't start at the Austins or the Pages or these huge contests if you've never written a script before, because those people are submitting to those contests every year with sometimes the same script, and they're still not getting in there, So there are a lot of ways to do it. If you don't have a writer's resume, I think the easiest answer is you got to create one for yourself.
And there aren't like quick
There's
answers
no
to
quick
it.
answer.
And who was it? I think Jason Reitman and another writer I know who's a showrunner said that when someone said, how'd you become a good writer? And my friend David said, by writing 10 really bad scripts first.
Yeah, right.
Because each script, not that everyone here, I hope that everyone who writes their first script, it will be great.
Yeah, right. That's what you hope.
But you really learn from each script.
Yeah.
And if you can get feedback from trusted sources.
Yeah.
And I mean, one other that I just saw last night, an American Express commercial with Lin-Manuel Miranda, and part of the narrative, he's saying, don't settle for this, don't settle for that, and don't settle for your 10th draft.
Yeah, right.
So
You're always working. We have a lot of
Yeah.
comments, so let's
Oh,
do this.
okay.
Let's go through the
Yeah.
next 10 minutes here. We'll try to
Okay.
get through these comments. Mike Rogers said, and this may have been an hour ago. I apologize, guys, we're a little slow. But Mike says, I recently received very positive feedback on a sci-fi pilot I've written. I'm wondering how long I should wait to contact the executive who provided the feedback, or wait to be contacted by that executive. It's pretty relative to the situation.
It is. If the executive said, I'll be in touch with you in a week and you don't hear back, I don't think there's anything wrong with pinging them.
I'd give it 3
yeah,
or 4 weeks.
Yeah.
If they said I'll be in touch, yeah.
Yeah, so maybe like 3 weeks, and maybe they didn't say, "Oh, I'll call you." But,
Right.
so if they just give you positive feedback, I would send an email saying, "It was so great talking to you. Thank you so much for that positive feedback. I wanted to circle back and see if it's possible to have a meeting, and or if there's anything else I can provide you with to." I've just done this recently with a writer, an executive at a network. So really interested in a project. We've worked with him doing a Bible and so on. And we sent an email saying, because he's stalled with his executives, is there anything else you need from us? That, so.
I think it depends on what the situation is, Mike. If there was an executive at a company who was kind enough to read the script and give you feedback, then the follow-up is a thank you. It's not necessarily, can you do something for me? If it was purposeful in that he was actually considering the project, and then there were thoughts about what he was going to try to do for you. Absolutely, 3 weeks you reach out and But if he didn't say, I'm going to help you with this, the follow-up is a thank you, and I'm still working hard, and I'd love to meet you sometime.
And or if he gave you feedback saying, your notes were so great, I've incorporated them and I've done some revisions.
Sure, right.
And just another little tip, and maybe people know this, but if you are going to send someone revisions, don't expect them to read the whole thing again. Highlight just the sections.
Totally. Or say, read pages 29 to 48, or the other way.
And you would say, don't make the assumption they're going to drop everything. So your notes were so constructive. I took them to heart. I've done some revisions. I'm excited about it. I think it's really improved.
Yeah.
In the event you have time and are interested, you can look at pages 39 to 48.
Yeah, right. And thank you, Michael, that what you said here. We got some really nice advice in the comments, everybody. But Michael said, thanks for tonight. Really appreciate it. You're welcome. Happy to be here. But yeah, Joy is the movie that you were talking about with Jennifer Lawrence and
Thank you.
Virginia Madsen. Yeah, everybody's chiming in with Joy. Everybody's used to the quick typing of the trivia. We're not doing trivia tonight, everybody. Looks like we are all ready for trivia. Exactly, Suzanne. Let's see here. I strongly feel you need a drunk screenwriting podcast. Well, we're kind of getting there, Michael, so kind of getting there. Mary Davis says, sometimes positive feedback is just feedback. You may want to ask permission to use the feedback like a testimonial. That's a possibility. Gary says, if you have put in the work, have a catalog, be it with writing, producing, or directing, put it in a resume. Having this resume in IMDb doesn't hurt, sure. There
Definitely.
are many ways to build a resume. I think it's just putting in the work. I think, the reason people like Wendy exist is for people who are ready to take that next step and go to that next level,
It's why I exist.
Well, okay. There are other reasons you exist for personal reasons, I'm sure.
I don't know if I exist sometimes.
Right. But, why we're here, and myself included, everybody at the ISA, we are doing everything we can to help the writers who are willing to put it in the time. I think that's the thing. Too often, just to be real, and I'm sure, Wendy, you've experienced this many times too, writers are looking for, the easy answer to how do I sell my screenplay. First of all, it doesn't happen anymore. You don't just outright sell a script. There are so many things, and we didn't really get to talk about packaging that much, but the process of trying to sell a project is more than just somebody reads a script and then they go like, great, I'll give you some money for it. It's not a product like that. It only becomes a product when a full package is put together. When you get a great director, you know where you're going to try to go to it. If you know you're going to try to go to Netflix, let's meet people at Netflix, find out what they're looking for, try to find a director that they're going to like, try to get that director, and then you got to spend the time reaching out to those agents and who rep the director, and then you've got a little bit of okay, we've got something to sell, and that can take months, if not years. And that's not even us being hard. And we're not trying to talk anybody down. That's just what happens.
Yeah, no, it's to quote my mom, who she had said that getting old is not for sissies. I would say working in the entertainment industry and being a screenwriter is one of the hardest, most noble, and can be most rewarding professions, but
Yeah.
it ain't for sissies. It's freaking hard.
It's really hard, but it's also incredibly rewarding if you manage the level of expectations. Like, there's nothing wrong with having the highest of hopes and the biggest of dreams. You have to have that, otherwise just, do something else. But if you expect something to happen within a certain amount of time frame, there was a writer that I brought into one of my live classes that I used to do, and he wrote on Goldberg's, and I think he moved onto another show after that. Really great guy and incredibly inspiring. And he said that one of the primary things that we do not have control over is our timeline. We just don't have control over when it's going to happen. And as long as you can accept that, then it's freedom. You just write.
Well, that's true. There was a great quote by David Seidler, who won the Oscar for King's Speech, and he said,
he wrote on that thing for 20 years or something. 40 years.
And
yeah.
here, so in a certain kind of way, it's sort of that preparedness meets opportunity. You have to. He really was committed to his craft and becoming a really good writer. And Tom Hooper's mom happened to have seen the play. I think it was a staged reading.
Okay.
And if his mother hadn't seen it, if
Right.
Tom Seidler hadn't written this beautiful play,
Yeah.
she said to her son, "I have your next movie."
Oh my God.
So, here was someone, I think, just trying to be the best writer that he could.
Right.
I'm sure with all of you who've written, because it takes so much, that something has sparked your imagination and excitement, and that's and to make it just like
You have to
Yeah.
stay in the flow.
Yeah.
There's that kind of, when you see an athlete who's already really good and then they get into a zone for, just a half of the game or something, it's because they've been doing it for so long prior to that moment of being in the zone. People don't just magically become Michael Jordan for a half. Michael Jordan had been working at that every day for his
like
entire
Steph
life.
Curry. He
Yeah.
apparently practices more than any basketball player.
Yeah.
So,
And it was, yes, of course he had that expectation of, I am going to become a professional basketball
and there
player.
was some innate, I think with people there are certain
There's a
innate
God-given
talents.
talent.
Yeah.
And that's one thing that I tell writers all the time is that, what we're up against, and I say we because I'm including Wendy and I too, is that we're up against the people who are more talented, better educated, and have more money and more contacts. And there are always going to be those people.
Always. Yeah.
Always. I have a client that I'm writing a book for who's extremely wealthy, like wow wealthy. And he even said there's always going to be someone wealthier than you. And so if you are intending to become wealthy, there's a level of managing expectations that you have to have. And the end result of being wealthy is there isn't, oh, I made it, I'm suddenly wealthy. There's working your way up to that. It's the same thing as screenwriting. You work your way up from one project to the next project. And I know a lot of writers that I've been working with who've been doing this for so many years, and they still have yet to really hit any major home run. But they love it, and they're going to keep doing it. Some of them are like, if I didn't do this, I don't know what I'd do, But you kind of have to have that mentality. Well, let's go through the rest here. I think we had a couple extras. We're going to probably hit the road here pretty soon, guys. So if you have any final questions, but let's see. No easy answers, that's for sure. Hi, Anthony. Disco shoes help. Trust and surrender, totally. Some of my scripts have taken 2 years.
Yes, it's a really good. Whoever said a career in writing is not a sprint.
Yeah.
It's a marathon.
Yeah. Head down. Keep honing your craft. Anthony, some of my scripts have taken 2 years to create. Most scripts, you're always writing. You're always writing, unless you're just like, I can't work on it anymore. I just got to put it away. But then you just start on something else. Well, as usual, thank you everybody for listening on the podcast. Thank you everybody for watching. I appreciate it. A huge thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. Cheers. It was fun.
Cheers,
Wendy.
everybody.
Yeah, it was fun, and we're probably going to be bringing more guests on. Felicity, of course, is going to be back. I think our next broadcast, I believe, is October 10. Not next week, but I think the following week. But a huge shout out to Movie Maker, Steel Wines, LA4hire.com,
Thank you.
and Wendy. So thank you guys. So thank you everybody to the ISA crew. Thank you everyone for tuning in. If you came in late, you can always go to the Facebook page and watch this recording. Maybe give it 15 minutes if you want to watch right now. And if you want to listen to just the audio, you can go to Curious About on the networkisa.org website.
Great.
So there you go.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Have a
We
good
will
night.
see you in a couple weeks.
Okay.
Good night.
Bye.